Greetings, Danimal Cannon coming to you from the bridge of the USS Enterprise, and you're watching Trek Watch. Welcome back to Trek Watch. Star Trek The Next Generation is my favorite show of all time, and I'm going to be ranking and reviewing the entire series until we have a completely objective, not at all biased ranking of every single episode. Alright, so before we get started, it's been a few weeks since my last upload, and I had to tell you I've been running into some copyright issues on my videos. And even though the clips that I'm using are entirely in fair use, because they're for review, commentary, and analysis, CBS still flags these on YouTube. And I was going to wait until my dispute on the last video is finished, but it looks like it's going to take a full month for that to actually be resolved. And hopefully, it'll all work out just fine. Hey, good news. It seems that CBS has released their claim on my video, which is great. I am using these clips in fair use. This is probably just going to be part of the process going forward. Annoying, but that's just how it is. Anyways, all that aside, we're reviewing the 5th episode of Season 1, The Last Outpost, otherwise known as the debut of the Ferengi. This episode starts off with the Enterprise pursuing a Ferengi ship who apparently stole some device from a Starfleet planet. In addition, this confrontation will also be first contact between the Federation and this new species. The Enterprise catches up with them and they get their first look at a Ferengi ship, which has kind of a biological look. In fact, the design of the Ferengi ship was inspired by the look of a horseshoe crab. As they decide how to engage, all of a sudden the Enterprise has a sudden power drain of all systems. As they sit there with their ship crippled, they discuss what they know about the Ferengi.
Drawn from Earth history, likens the Ferengi to the ocean-going Yankee traders.
Yankee traders, I like the sound of that.
I believe the analogy refers to the worst quality of capitalists. I doubt they wear red, white, and blue or look anything like Uncle Sam.
The Enterprise could face certain doom as their unworking ship is powerless to this mysterious race. Yet, the bridge crew devolves into petty semantic and cultural arguments for some reason.
Uncle who?
What have bright primary colors got to do with it?
Red, white, and blue for the United States.
French. More properly, use the same colors in the order blue, white, and red.
Engineering is apparently incompetent, so they send LaForge down to figure it out, a foreshadowing to his role to come in later seasons. The chief engineers from previous episodes are conspicuously missing. Geordi and Riker come up with a plan to escape and are quite excited about it.
Ooh-wee.
Picard and Riker talk strategy.
He will triumph who knows when to fight, and when not to fight.
Glad the Academy is still teaching the strategies of Sun Tzu.
Their plan does not work, and Picard curses in French.
Merde.
Can you do that on TV? I guess you can do that. Oh my god, they brought back the Gene Roddenberry bird. Unsure of what to do, they essentially surrender to the Ferengi over an audio hail.
Attention, Ferengi Starship. I would request that you present your terms to us.
Way to go, Picard. This is the second time you've surrendered in 4 episodes. The Ferengi respond, completely misinterpreting Picard's surrender, and plot twist, they reveal that their ship is crippled as well. This leads to a big reveal of the Ferengi on the view screen. Ugh, they're so ugly, and they think we're ugly too.
The ugliness of the human was not an exaggeration.
The senior bridge crew need to discuss their plan, but oops, there's children playing in the observation lounge. Get out of here, kids. Data is supposed to be working, but is playing with a Chinese finger trap. Was there seriously no other way to work this metaphor into the plot? This is the most ham-fisted thing I've ever seen. I actually had to re-watch this scene because it was trying to do a lore dump and explain the plot, but I was so distracted by Data getting caught in a children's toy. Anyways, Data figures out that the planet that the two ships are orbiting held an outpost of some super powerful ancient civilization or something called the Takan Empire. Their sensors reveal that forces on the planet itself are draining power from both ships.
Maybe we should ask them to join us in this.
Team up with the Ferengi, sir?
Picard suggests that they should team up with the Ferengi, so he hails them and oh my god, why is his head so big?
Your alien images again shock us.
Why? Why did you zoom in so much? Why? So an away team beams down to the surface, but for reasons, they all get separated during transport. Riker is alone and searches for the others. Great acting, Frakes. At least the landscape looks epic. He finds Data climbing rocks, and Geordi is hanging around. The Ferengi ambush them with energy whips, and it looks like curtains for the crew on the surface. Meanwhile, back on the Enterprise, they're running out of power and the crew will likely freeze to death there.
Where's Wesley?
He's in our quarters. I was tempted to give him a sedative.
You shouldn't. He has the right to meet death awake.
What?
Is that a male perspective?
Hashtag toxic masculinity, Picard. Grabby hands on the gold. The team takes advantage of a lightning strike and Worf starts kicking ass. Riker almost gets vampire bitten by a Ferengi, and Tasha Yar shows up with a phaser and saves the day.
You work with your females, arm them, and force them to wear clothing.
Oh my god, we're not doing the security officer as a female thing again. We just did this last episode. God, I can't imagine why Denise Crosby quit. It turns out that the crystalline outcroppings are actually energy absorbers. It's a good thing these two cultures started fighting violently with energy weapons.
This entire planet has been turned into a power accumulator.
Oh no, energy ghost wizards.
Be you barbarians?
Nothing is more offensive to an energy ghost wizard than barbarians.
Barbarians all.
The two crews chat with the wizard. The Ferengi try to convince him that the Enterprise crew is evil because they clothe their females.
They clothe their female, inviting others to unclothe them, the very death of perversion.
Hashtag quitting soon.
He will triumph who knows when to fight and when not to fight.
Okay, I was definitely not expecting the callback to Sun Tzu. Apparently, the wizard finds ancient Chinese philosophy to be interesting and decides to let them go. The crew awakes from an almost dead state.
Not a moment too soon, John.
Yeah, nobody calls him John. Riker and the wizard go on a philosophy journey and hang out while the Ferengi freak out and dance around like gerbils on cocaine. They decide to also let the Ferengi go, so hopefully they can learn and grow. The Enterprise beams over a bunch of Chinese finger puzzles to the Ferengi ship to teach them a lesson or something. This is really weird. Alright, so what do we think of this episode? Like most of Season 1, it's kind of a mess, but we have the debut of the Ferengi, who is interesting. This episode was written by Herb Wright, who also developed and designed the Ferengi race for this show. I managed to find some interviews with Herb that are actually pretty interesting, and he talks about what they intended to create when they made the Ferengi. Wright recalls, I went off to noodle with what the look and shape and construction of this new villain would be, physically and emotionally, to work out what their society would be like. Basically, I just had to come up with a new world, and that wasn't hard. I just looked around at 80s America, where greed was good and Gecko was one of our heroes. With the Ferengi, the idea is that profit is the most important thing. You always like to come out on top and business rules supreme. The 24th century that Roddenberry envisioned was one where humanity had worked out its personal and public differences. The real conflicts would have to do with cosmic rays or alien possession things that would alter us against our will. But there was no one who would voice those aspects of greed and corruption and selfishness. So the only people we could relate to on the show were the aliens and the villains, because those are the people who acted like us. The thing I've always thought about a good villain is that basically they're just like us. They've got their vices, our faults, but they're exaggerated. The reality is they're usually closer to us than we would wish to admit. Sexism came with the package, and Gene wanted to take that to an ultimate degree. It was his idea that by law, no female Ferengi could even own clothing, let alone wear it. Gene Roddenberry also wanted to make sure that if we stopped to think, we would have reasons to be jealous of the Ferengi. His whole point was that they might be nasty little SOBs, but between all the stuff they've got and the money, they've got all the hot ladies and they know what to do about it, and there's something they're actually good at. The idea was that because they were really more like us than the Starfleet characters, the viewer could find himself agreeing with them. I also wanted to create somebody we could love, said Wright, and then hate ourselves for loving them. Yeah, they just made that 80s guy from Futurama. When designing the look of the Ferengi, they originally started with a Middle Eastern Babylonian vibe, with large pointed beards, but ended up going with a hairless look. The baldness accentuated their brains as a reference to their cunning. Wright says, they're businessmen. They can generate all that electrical steam upstairs. How about if one of the things they could do was make your head explode? They decided against this for budgetary and family programming reasons. Jesus. The result was that the Ferengi ended up being taken less seriously than Wright had hoped. So on paper, I actually like a lot of these ideas. Very high-minded concepts intended to be a self-reflection satire. Very Star Trek. Unfortunately, they weren't remotely successful with this. Nobody could see these tiny dudes bouncing around like hyperactive gerbils and say, wow, that's us. No one could see a Ferengi attempting to violently disrobe Tasha Yar and say, I am jealous of them. And to be fair, I really don't think you can distill these complex ideas into a few lines of dialogue. Additionally, their design and acting direction was not helping people take the Ferengi seriously either. So The Last Outpost is the lowest rated episode of Season 1. However, I do think that most of that comes from the fact that it came after Code of Honor, and people just were not interested in tuning in the week after that. The whole theme of this episode with ancient Chinese philosophy and the art of war, it's all a little dodgy. The episode implies that these philosophies are literal galaxy brain concepts that cultures of all ages can appreciate. In a twist of irony, the 1987 film Wall Street, the protagonist Gordon Gekko frequently cites passages from The Art of War as guiding principles for his aggressive trading techniques. And Herb Wright stated that Gordon Gekko was a direct influence in the design of the Ferengi. So Sun Tzu is the Ferengi, but Riker and the Space Wizard also like Sun Tzu, but not the Ferengi. But why is Sun Tzu the thing? What? And the whole Chinese finger trap thing, like, yeah, it's Chinese, but actually they might have been invented by a guy in Queens, and I don't know, it just kind of comes off awkward and ham-fisted than being a clever storytelling device. Yeah, it's really not clever at all. All right, let's get into the metrics though. Computer, run a level 3 diagnostic on The Last Outpost. When measuring the level of horniness on this episode, you might think this is reasonably tame. But our sensors have retrieved a surprising score of 7 out of 10. Sure, the Ferengi sexually harassed Tasha Yar, but what else was there? Well, there's a behind-the-scenes story that I was super glad was cited, because I literally would not have believed it was real if I couldn't find the actual article myself. In Cinefantastique magazine, volume 23, there's an interview with Herb Wright, and it says some interesting stuff. Let's dive in. One influence on the Ferengi was described as Gene Roddenberry's sex fetish. In early first season discussions between them about developing the Ferengi, Roddenberry let Wright know that it was his intention to make the species well endowed. He wanted to put a gigantic codpiece on the Ferengi, Wright stated. He spent 25 minutes explaining to me all the sexual positions that the Ferengi could go through. I said, Gene, this is a family show on at 7 p.m. on Saturdays. Gene, my God, man, chill out. Researching for this show has made me realize you are so much creepier than I ever could have imagined. Next up, sensors are measuring the thought-provoking meter. Did we come out of this episode with an enhanced appreciation of the universe? This episode gets a 4 out of 10. It tries really hard to show how enlightened Riker is compared to the Ferengi, and I actually don't hate the scene with him philosophizing with the ancient space wizard. The Ferengi itself are supposed to be an allegory for 1980s capitalistic greed, but for all its effort, it really falls short of anything truly meaningful. And finally, we have our PTSD meter. Does the crew experience events that are going to leave lasting consequences on their very soul? On a scale of 1 to 10, we surprisingly get a 6 here. Season 1 TNG has trouble with tone. Data's getting stuck in Chinese finger traps and the crew is laughing. At the same time, Picard is surrendering to unknown alien species with a crippled ship. And also, there's these scenes, and even though they're understated, the entire crew is going to freeze and suffocate to death in this episode. There's children aboard. Dr. Crusher is talking about anesthetizing her child so he can die comfortably. The stakes are super high in this episode, but you would never be able to tell with this crew's aloof attitude. Now we're going to jump over to the tier list, where we're ranking each and every episode of The Next Generation. The question is, where does The Last Outpost fall? I'm thinking it's gotta go in the D rank. It's not quite an F. The real question is it better than Encounter at Farpoint? I'm actually going to rank it ahead of Farpoint if for any reason it's just less boring. In fact, the more I think about it, this episode is very similar to Encounter at Farpoint. The episode encounters a being much more powerful than it, Picard surrenders for the second time, and they receive mercy from the more powerful entity by becoming an enlightened society or something. Thanks for sticking around. My name is Danimal Cannon. Be sure to subscribe to see more episodes. What did you think? What did I miss? What did I get wrong? Please let me know in the comments. Hopefully I can learn to navigate these copyright issues a little more smoothly in the future, and we can continue our journey. See you next mission.
I offer a thought. He will triumph who knows when to
Subscribe and leave a comment.